got our mentors all with us now, so thank you all for joining us. What we'll do is get each of you to do a little quick intro. So everyone else did their intros earlier. We'll get a little intro from you, just a 30 to 60 second who you are, elevator pitch if you wish, whichever you'd like to do, and then we'll jump into a bit of Q&A around our topics for the day. So Stuart, I might start with you and get you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Joy. Can you hear me?
Can do.
Excellent. Stuart Hazel. I'm a business consultant, do R&D tax agent work, and until January of this year was a commercialisation advisor with Accelerating Commercialisation. Retired from that role in January. Have a background in biomedical science, research, company director, and have been the CEO of a public company as well as CEO of startup companies.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stuart. And Stuart's been part of our community here in Toowoomba with Canvas Co-working and Startup Toowoomba for a few years now, I think right from the very beginning actually, so coming up to 5 years. So we're really grateful for your time with this program as well. Thanks, Stuart. Angela, or should I say Lisa or Marge, but maybe Angela. I love your background.
Yeah, I virtually moved to the Simpson studio. That's where I want to be. So hey everyone, I think most people in Australia know me to run Hackathons Australia, and I also run Hackathons International. So just started that up, so very similar to your phase, but we kind of just did that in the past couple of weeks. At Schneider, I run now helping out with the Smart Grid team there. And previous to that, so very recently, I just changed my roles as of a couple of weeks ago. I headed the innovation function in our zone. So that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Angela, and great to have you here with us. And I know there's, lots of changes in hackathons at the moment. There was a big startup weekend on COVID just happened last weekend, all fully online, which was awesome all over the world. So great work with what you're doing. Thank you. And Rowan, we'll jump to you for a little intro as well.
G'day everyone, I'm Rowan from RDH Integration Services in Toowoomba. Small business, 16. We've been running for a bit over 2.5 years, and we specialise in connectivity to technology. Been doing a lot of R&D ourselves in regards to agriculture and how we can help ag tech, and I guess we specialise in building a solution with nothing too specific. So a lot of our stuff is off the shelf. We piece a lot of pieces together and build a solution. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rowan. Great to have you here as well. Awesome. So today we've given the teams a really fast introduction to business models and also pipeline development. So now we want to learn a little bit from our mentors about their experience and how they've either done that themselves in the past or their advice that they have in discovering that business model, and particularly a viable business model, and the challenges that can go alongside of that, and maybe help you think a little differently to what you've been thinking, or think outside the box. So Stuart, I might start with you, because obviously with your work, both in your own companies but with the government, I know you've worked supporting a lot of people in helping them discover variances or differences in their business model to help them actually become sustainable and profitable businesses. What are some of the thinking points that you have right at the beginning of the journey with someone when they're starting to explore what their potential business model could be? What are some of those things that you get them to think about straight up?
The first and foremost is, what problem are you solving? If you can't delineate the problem you're solving, then you run into difficulty in actually promoting or developing a model to address that problem. And I find simply asking that question will get people to go back and look at their business and say, what problem are we really addressing? The next one I look at are the people in the business, because we all have different skills, we all have different abilities, and it takes a fair bit of courage to actually look at yourself realistically and say, do I have the right mix of skills and knowledge to address the problem that you're trying to solve? So let me have those as my opening comments and allow others to add theirs.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Stuart. And Angela, we might jump to you. So obviously through hackathons, obviously you're always thinking, getting people to think differently. What do you encourage people to think about in that very early stage of thinking what their business model could be and exploring that?
Yeah, so with hackathons, a key thing that we teach a lot of people is if you are approaching an investor, what is the return on investment that you're going to give them? So for example, at Schneider, I used to have a budget of $10 million. And it seems sizable, but every single dollar that's spent, I need to understand what kind of revenue that I want out of that. I am looking for a minimum of 10 or 20 times the investment. So for example, I might give you $2,000 to do a marketing campaign, and because I used to manage the channel at Schneider as an example, so I might I'll give you $2,000 or even $5,000 to a reseller, and they're going to put on this amazing campaign all around uninterrupted power supply and how that's important for us, especially when blackouts and weather and storms occur. So let's say that, the topic is going to be about weather, and we're going to target people who are, say hospitals, for example, as an example. So we kind of go, so what is the key message that you're trying to tell, and who is the target audience? And are we going to capture this so that we're getting at least one order in that might be worth $50,000 and getting at least 5 of them if you're targeting your customers. So like, for example, we might go, you're going to do a great event or whatever else it is, or we're going to invest $5,000 in you, that's awesome, but you're going to have to bring us at least the money or the return on investment that we can see that's tangible for us. So this is something that maybe a lot of hackathons or maybe startups don't really consider upfront, and honestly really differentiates what a really great pitch is and what a great idea is. So having that scope at least put into your deck is really important.
Wonderful. Thanks, Angela. And I think that, when we look at that and think about some of the stuff we've spoken about over the last couple of weeks, it is identifying who's that person that you're talking to within the organisation and what's the problem they have. So for you in Schneider, you needed a 10x return. That was the job you had to do. So we have to understand that for each individual person that we're dealing with. So that's a really good point. What's the problem that person's trying to solve, and what's the job they're trying to do within their organisation as well? And they are different there. So thank you for that. Rowan, how about yourself? Obviously you have started a business and found a business model, and I imagine it's probably taken some evolution to get where you are today. So if you're thinking about that process that you've been through, what are some of those key things that you've perhaps learned that you would recommend to others to think about when thinking about their business model and how they're going to make their business profitable and sustainable?
When you're going into business, the key component you need to remember is you're going into business to make money. And at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. Things is the same as going to work. The biggest thing I can, mimic what Stuart was saying was, one is you need the right people. You need to trust the right people. In my team alone, everyone's got their own part that they can do and that they look after. So I can't take on everything. I have no idea what happens in the back end side of things. That's why I have Carol. I have no idea what goes on in the IT side of things. That's why I have them. So don't be scared to leverage off your people. Make sure you trust your people, but also know your worth as a business and your team. I'm pretty lucky as a startup company where with the other 2 employees that I had previously, I had over 100 years of experience as a startup company with my team. So just trust your team and make sure you relax, because when you start when you do start to get the runs on the boards, you start to get jittery. So just make sure you breathe, relax, slow down, and just know your worth.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. And I think, breathing is a good thing to actually be really conscious of, because sometimes it is taking a breath before making a decision that can help influence the decision itself, but also how you feel about it, because sometimes it's that reaction that we have to things that can influence whether it's a positive experience for us or not. And obviously we want a positive experience. We want to make money, but we also want to enjoy the ride as much as we can as well. So the other thing when we're looking at business model is we were talking earlier about the variety of different business models and how they're starting to merge together. So someone who may have once perhaps provided, a fairly straightforward sales process might now also be incorporating something else into their business model to make them more robust and likely to be able to handle shifts in the market or in the industry. Stuart, I might jump back to you. For businesses, again, your own businesses as well as the ones you've worked with, have you found that their initial focus is perhaps quite narrow and then had to broaden to actually become sustainable by providing not only a product but perhaps a service as well? What have you seen in that sort of, I guess, making a bit more of a hybrid model?
Yes, Joy, I mean, one of the interesting things, and I think we're seeing that a lot during this sort of shutdown period where businesses are having to adapt very rapidly. I often, when I'm mentoring a business, is saying, what could happen tomorrow that put you out of business? And and I used an example once upon a time to an owner of a coffee shop, and I said, what happens if Starbucks moves in next door? What impact will that have on your business? Now, it might actually be positive, but you need to be thinking about the impacts of the change that's constantly going on. And the businesses that don't respond to change are the ones that ultimately fail. And so I've seen with my own business, it's constantly evolving. I start new things, I try new things, I stop doing some things. So you've constantly got to be surveying the horizon and saying, what are the threats to my business? Those can be technology threats, they can be competitor threats. But if you're not constantly aware of and thinking about strategies for addressing a constantly evolving market, then you do really run the risk. And online sales is the classic example of the modern time. I think there'll be a number of businesses that come out of the COVID-19 environment who will change permanently, and there'll be a number who will never come back to life after the event, unfortunately. So you have to be constantly aware. And I've seen a number of business examples where they had good people, good products, but they failed to recognise an existential threat and literally disappear overnight.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stuart. And Angela, I imagine at Schneider, you guys were probably always looking for, better ways to do things and what else was coming. In terms of, extending on what Stuart was saying around being, looking, for the disruption, obviously, Schneider's well known for being innovative, but what's some of the, I guess, principles or practices that you've seen employed there and elsewhere for identifying the disruption that's coming, that's not there yet, that perhaps businesses need to prepare for?
Yeah, interesting question. So with disruption, so for those who don't know who and what Schneider does, we ensure that everyone has access to energy, so that energy is a basic human right. So for example, like I was talking to some people in Palestine helping with their hackathon, and they said to me, oh, Angela, we're sorry if everyone can't join, but we have an 8-hour on and 8-hour off policy where 8 hours of the day you have power and 8 hours the next 8 hours you don't have power, and so they have this continuous cycle. So I found that pretty interesting, just understanding what their landscape is like, and it's very different for every location because every location has a different culture. So in the way and how Schneider does things, I think you need to understand your position in the market. So Schneider, they say, is the Apple of the electrical market. So a lot of the time we are and have to be market leaders. And so when we define what this looks like, we kind of have to say, okay, this is the new energy landscape. And so in the new energy landscape, a lot of the time we are electrical consumers, whereas the new energy landscape is where we can contribute back to the grid. So normally you get the utility provider, that goes to transmission lines, and then it goes to retail, and then it goes to us as consumers. But us as consumers, we're now selling energy back to the retail, back to transmission lines, back to the grid. And so this is what we have defined to be the new energy landscape. So that's one thing to consider, understanding what your position is in the market. So when it comes to business models, because Schneider is a really big company, it's really good to understand what is a high profit margin and what isn't as high as, so we call this like a diverse mix in what you have and what you sell. And this is what we do with hackathons as well. So for example, in the energy landscape, you might be wanting to implement a microgrid, and a lot of the lead time takes 2 to 3 years to close a deal, and that's a really long time. Whereas if you're looking into the transactional side of things, so if you're selling circuit breakers, power tags, anything in the switchboard, you might just get someone like a specifier who goes, okay, we just need a power tag so that we can put it in our switchboard, and that will just switch things on and off or direct energy to wherever it needs to be. So then you've got transactional business, and then you've got more project kind of business. Another thing is this high touch and low touch concept. So like with hackathons, international, for example, we've got kind of similar where like you've got transactional, and then we've got medium touch, and then we've got high touch. So high touch is that, okay, we want to outsource our hackathon to someone else, and we want someone else to look after this. So this is an example that Macquarie University kind of came to us with, and we're like, okay, using this, how can we help fulfill your need? Another example is we're seeing a lot of consultants and partners say, you know, hackathons Australia or hackathons international, we don't necessarily want to outsource the whole thing to you, but maybe you can come on to be an advisor for us, or maybe we can partner with you to help market what we're doing to the market. So then we've got another package tailored towards that. And then the other thing is the low touch, and this is more transactional, where we have e-learning modules where people can just self-service themselves, and we're not doing a lot, but we've created a product and we can sell it 10,000, 10 million times. So that's like an easy one for us, and that's a lot of high margin. So we've concentrated a lot of our business based on that. So I think you need to understand where you want to play and what you have in terms of your assets.
Wonderful. Thanks, Angela. And I think that goes a long way to thinking about the differences within your audience and how they like to engage and the level of service that they need as well, and understanding, you know, who are those ones that are going to want you as opposed to just your product or service, and who's in between. So, and that certainly, you know, if you sell your time at the same rate as you sell your information, it's not always going to get you where you need to go. So great points there. Rowan, obviously in the process of establishing yourself, I imagine you've probably had a few hurdles and changes in your business model along the way as you've grown and adapted. So how have you found, I guess from a business owner perspective, the challenge of being, you know, finding that, you know, that if there's some disruption coming, or you can be the disruption, but finding that opportunity to start to move beyond what you're already doing to perhaps bring on, you know, a different part of the business that can expand the diversity of your business model. Have you been able to do that? And how have you, I guess, both personally and professionally, risen to that challenge of changing how you do things?
So I think change is inevitable, especially in a startup business and a small business. RDH itself doesn't necessarily have a core business, so we've been adaptive from day one and had to diversify off the bat. I think you need to set rules, set yourself ground rules. So one ground rule for myself is that weekends is my time. So I've got 4 kids myself, so you've got to make sure you've got time for yourself. If you can't recharge your batteries, then you won't be good in regards to being adaptive, and you've got to be quick thinking on your feet. So if we have things that come up all the time, like I just had 2 contractors walk in, and that's why I was a bit off then. They're talking with my IT guy. So you've got to learn to be able to adapt, and also be able to learn that you're not going to be able to control everything. The adaptive side and the unknown side of things, the small business, especially in the innovative side of things, you know, that's always going to be a fear there. But you know, there's a lot of people out there that say risk big, and you know, you got to take the highs and lows of it. So yeah, I hope that sheds a bit of light, Joy.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rowan. And yeah, I think it's definitely important. And whether it's a weekend, Saturday, Sunday, or just a couple of days during the week that actually suits your business better, it's really important to take that time out to, again, recharge yourself, to make sure that you can approach things in a good light as well. So that's really great. So the other part of our topic for today is around pipeline development. And this is something that, you know, we've touched on over the last couple of weeks in terms of who our customers might be, and the fact that we might have multi-layers of customers. So people who use our product, people who are going to make the decision to buy it, people who are going to make the decision to pay, but also people who might influence others in that process, and in getting them to, you know, to be aware of you even, or to buy and engage with you. And certainly when you're entering into a sector that maybe you don't have a lot of connections with, starting to build that pipeline of potential opportunity can be quite challenging, other than just, you know, Googling organisations, but you need to find the person within that organisation to talk to. So Stuart, I know you have lots of connections in lots of different places, but when it comes to actually creating a pipeline of opportunity, of people to talk to and engaging them in starting with you when, as an organisation, and most of our teams here are quite, I'm going to say, young in their journey. What do you think are some of the best approaches to actually starting to build that pipeline and getting the connections you need to get those, I guess, names on your list even to talk to, but then that introduction or those first conversations to start to see if these potential customers could become customers?
Oh, there's a loaded question there. I think there's a number of aspects to it. You know, I'm engaged with a number of mentoring programs, and I think they're very useful at the very early stages, because what can happen is that not all mentors can do all things for all people, but because we normally do have a network, if we can't refer you directly to someone, we can generally refer you to someone who can then refer you on. So that mentoring network is certainly valuable in terms of finding connections. And even when you're been around a long time and you've built a network, I still draw upon those networks to get introductions to people to find information. So networking is important, and it takes a lot of work to keep a network alive. You can't just sort of leave it sit forever and not interact with your network. The other side of it is understanding, you know, you're talking about pipelines and things like that, is thinking laterally about where you want to take your business. There's a fellow down in Melbourne, quite an interesting character, but he has a number of books, and he's developed this system called lateral matrix thinking. And he puts out these simple little books with nice tables that actually help you to frame the way you can diversify your portfolio. In other words, you know, you're working in a certain stream, and you may see that that's running out, but it offers opportunities to look at different ways that you can position yourself and your product. But ultimately, I think working with your networks, attending events, as much as online is great, some of the greatest benefit comes through the serendipitous interactions you have. I remember I was in the US at a conference once, and one of the best interactions I had was standing on an escalator next to a guy, and we talked on the way up, and by the time we got to the top of the escalator, we were exchanging business cards and actually went on and did some work together. So I'll stop there and let Angela and others add their contribution.
Thanks, Stuart. And that's, yeah, the classic, do you have an elevator pitch or an escalator pitch in that case? Do you have something to talk about that's worth talking about in the moment and off the cuff? Because it is really important to be able to do that. So definitely important. And I think to Stuart's other point about, it's about the constant connection with your network. And when you go to an event, it's not about collecting 100 cards. It's about making some meaningful relationships with the people that you meet, and whether they need to be in your network or not. So Angela, I will jump to you, because obviously as part of what you do with Schneider, but then also with hackathons, I imagine you meet a lot of people. Do you have a process or a system or a structure that you follow in deciding, when you talk to somebody and you meet them, whether they are going to become part of your network? And then if so, how do you track that person so you remember them later? Like, how do you collect the information and then draw upon that when you need it at a later stage?
Yeah, good question. So to answer that directly, with Schneider, we use Salesforce. So we are one of Salesforce's biggest customer, and we capture every single detail. We have a very strict and strong way to do things. I'm going to say this because not everyone does it, but in terms of, if you really want sales excellence within your organization, you need to ensure that everything is being captured. When I was out on site with some what we call area sales representatives, so they go up, for example, to architects or to contractors, and they visit them. After every single meeting, we sat down, we logged onto BFO, onto our tablets, onto our iPads, and we noted down what the interactions were with them and how we wanted to act with them. So I think it's really important to have a strict process in a large organization, especially if there are a lot of people talking to the same people again and again and again. However, there could be some interactions that go beyond this process. You might meet someone at an event, you might forget who they were, or you might say, oh, this is just a friendly contact that I have, and that's okay as well. I think what I've learned is at Schneider, just doing the due diligence and saying, hey, by the way, I'm speaking at a South Australia Power Networks event. So just telling the account manager or the account director, that is super important. So having a bit of cadence around that, so that the account manager, when you're delegating that, is well informed, is very important. In terms of hackathons and Hackathons Australia, everything that we've done has been really reactive so far, because I'm all about automation. So we don't specifically seek out to go to events. People come to us and we speak when it's required, or if we feel like that it's valuable for the community. So from that perspective, like a lot of Facebook posts are automated, or the Twitter posts, we just retweet everyone, or we just use Hootsuite and that just goes out by itself. In terms of emails, it's the same deal. We just put them in and then we schedule all the emails as we can. And then if people want to get something out of us, then they email us, and that's how we qualify whether people want to use our services or not. We're not necessarily very proactive, and that's just the way that we do things. So we know that when people approach us proactively through email, that they are really ready and 80% of the way there in terms of what they're looking for. And also
Right.
another thing to off Stuart's, you mentioned mentoring a lot. I just wanted to add the sponsorship kind of relationship with people. So in my perspective, it's great to have mentors, but it's also good to have sponsors. So sponsors are the people who understand where the money is. So knowing who has what budget and identifying who has that. So for example, I had a mentor, Michelle. She has been in a couple of organizations like IBM, Willow, and now at Lendlease. And when I was looking for my new role, she said, okay, Angela, talk to this person, and this person, because I know that they're hiring and they've got money to bring on new people. So just keep that in mind.
Great, thanks Angela. And I think again, it is important to recognise the stage you're at with different people as well, whether you do need to be proactive or reactive as in that sector, but having a system is good, even if you're not a big business. You know, Salesforce might be too expensive for you or have features that you just don't need yet, but having some sort of system or structure is important to be able to capture those details and, you know, be able to draw back upon them, and certainly where you have a team to be able to share that information amongst your team, which is obviously important. So Rowan, keen to know for yourself in your pipeline development, sales funnel, whatever you like to call it, but those future prospective customers as well as your current customers, do you have a system that you use for managing them, getting them in the first instance and then managing them once you've got them in?
Because of the size of the art, it's very easy for me to, I guess, be able to service all our customers and potential new ones. The pipeline to get new customers, well, we don't advertise much at all, if any. You know, we'll go to Funnel Fest and we'll do a couple of field days and stuff like that. But for me, it's more the networking events, you know, like the startup Toowoomba breakfasts, you know, Brendan Golby meetups. Get out there and networking, but in the networking side of things too, I don't necessarily go to sell. You know, I go there to interact with people and try and get just liaise with people, build trust with them, get to know people, and from there I've had a really, really good rapport. You just start talking with someone, and a lot of the times too, you will find that you'll notice the people that aren't really comfortable. So if you can go over there, and you might not be comfortable, if you can make someone else comfortable in an uncomfortable position at a networking event, you'd be surprised at how that will work. I mean, I met Dave that way at Boomerang Nursery. You know, there's a lot of big players there. You just go up, you say g'day, start chewing the fat, as they say, and things just seem to fall into place. But then when you're going to I guess, make that and push that into a pipeline, make sure you know your stuff. Don't be a yes man, and don't be scared to tell people to say no. That's my take on it anyway, because people actually respect you and people actually turn around and go, oh, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. But don't go into specifics of what the technology or what it does. Just tell them what they want to hear, because they're engaging you as a professional, and all they want to know is that this guy knows his stuff and he'll be the one to sort it out for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Rowan. And I think that's certainly important. Yep.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
Based on what Angela said, where she talked about sponsors, and just give a specific example. There's about 4 people that I can name, which I won't, where I have, I'll use the word promoted. That is, I've recognised their talents. I've seen that they're people of integrity, and those people, I can say that 2 or 3 times during their career, I've made a positive intervention that's got them into a new position and a new role. And I only say that to say to the team, understand that if there are people who believe in you and you do have integrity and you do have something to offer, people will support you. You know, we've all had support on our journeys, and that's part of the reason why we get involved with these things. It's a sort of, you know, whether it's paying forward or giving back. So just be aware of that sort of sponsor role that Angela spoke about can be really a real positive impact on whether it's you personally in your career or through your business.
Great, thanks Stuart. And I think that is a really good point to remember, both on the receiving side but on the sharing side as well, that particularly with your teams, you have that opportunity to be that, or other people in your network, you have that opportunity to be, the sponsor of others as well, where you do see that potential in someone. And then similarly, where you've got that good relationship with others. So just another thing that sort of come through there as well, which I think is important, and Rowan, I might actually jump back to you on this one first, but the time it takes from when you meet someone, let's say at a networking event, to when that may become something, can often be long. So in terms of managing the relationship and building that relationship and keeping in touch with people, and I guess keeping that iron hot, or at least warm, for sometimes an extended period of time. It may be several months before someone's ready to actually engage with you as a customer. Have you got a theory, a system, a process, or anything that you have that helps you to understand from the time that you meet someone until they become your customer, what that looks like, and the fact that meeting someone today might not mean that they'll pay you money tomorrow, so it does take time. So how do you learn that and influence that time?
I think a lot of it comes down to taking the time for them at the start. I mean, initially you got a new customer, you need to ensure them and spend the time with them at the start and really step them through the whole process. You give them the time at the start, and all you're doing is building that trust and relationship with them as a customer and as someone who's providing that service. But then also don't be scared to just follow up. And even if it's just following up, it's not about putting pen to paper if you have any more questions. By constantly showing them that you will provide them, I guess, support, you'll be surprised how much more of that will feed back to you, and you'll get referrals on. That's how we've built. I'm not saying that you need to be answering the phone call at 6 p.m. every Friday night for that. You've also got to understand about where your cut-off point is as well. So again, it comes down to what service you provide and what it's worth to them as well as yourself. For me, going in, having a conversation with someone, following up, going out to site to see them, see what we can do for them, but not pestering and just following up to say, hey, do you have any other questions, or how are you going with this, or and being proactive, not reactive, being proactive in assisting them, and then the dollars and the figure, I guess, at the end of the day will speak for the solution that you provided.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rowan. And I think that, persistence, we sometimes may feel that we might be, harassing someone if we follow up with them on a, regular basis, but often it's what they are looking for, is that regular touch point. And again, not pushing them necessarily, but keeping them moving forward. So
yeah, sorry, Joy, I just want to say, so like for me, myself, I spend a lot of time in my car, constantly driving. So for me, that's good for me to find time to make phone calls. And that also proves beneficial as well, because I don't have my laptop in front of me and I'm not looking at the dollar figure. I'm just more just liaising with them to see, hey, did you get that? Does everything make sense? Do you have any questions? And it's not the pressure for the sale because I'm not looking at the dollar figure.
Yep. I might actually just ask then, Rowan, do you have a system that you use of, to list out who you need to be calling, or do you rely on your memory?
Yeah, it's basically my memory. Yeah. Look, I do have a system. I actually, a free thing that we actually use here, which the boys got me onto, and I was reluctant to use it first, is Trello. And we just go through and make multiple boards all the time. So we've got our own RDH one. I've got my own personal one, what I'm doing, what I'm working on, and then I've got my forward thinking. So, my big clients, what's in the pipeline for them, what we're looking to do for them. And then I've got my rainy day one. So when we're doing our R&D, when one of the guys has got free time, we go back through that. But Yeah, we've got a prospect list there as well and a leads. In a previous software that we actually had a lead generator in that. And it wasn't a lot of money. It was good. You actually got notifications for follow-ups. But yeah, for me, I just live by my Trello, so it's a virtual diary basically.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks, Rowan. Very good. And Angela, probably a slightly different question for you, because I know with Salesforce, obviously, there's a lot of automation in there, and as an enterprise level, you've probably got access to things that the average person who might have a CRM doesn't have. But how do you find, that that pipeline movement, I guess, and it may not actually be a role you have, but probably more of your sales team's roles, but you may have some interaction with it. But people enter the pipeline, they don't all come out as a customer, and they move through the different stages, obviously at different time frames, and they might drop off. But trying to keep people engaged through that process, is there a formula, I guess, that you have or have seen work well for that, to keep people gradually, as it may be, moving through that pipeline?
Yeah, I think every organization is unique, so you need to know yourself and your customers best. With our customers, we always have what we call an always on policy. So like when I was doing stuff for Intel, their slogan's always on, and at Schneider it's life is on, so why not put them together? And so we always have at least something to inform, whether it be news, webinars, training, something that's going on, especially when I ran the partner program, where like every month we would at least have something there, A, for technical people, and B, for salespeople, because they were kind of the two streams that we saw was trending, especially in the partner database, you could say. The next thing that we do is, because we have a lot of stuff with Salesforce, we have cadence calls. So for example, every week we have an opportunity pipeline review, and this is looking at who do we want to engage with and who do we not want to engage with, because our pipeline, especially in the smart grid team, is yonks. It's just like exponential. There's too many people approaching us. So we really want to define strategically who the customers that we want to engage with. And so some things that we look for are, who is this customer and what is their intention? Are they looking at building resiliency, so always having business continuity? B, are they looking into lowering their costs or understanding and standardizing their energy costs, because that could be really up and down for businesses? And the third thing is sustainability. So if they hit all three of those marks, then we go, okay, maybe there's something in here and let's more actively engage with them. It's also good to understand how eager their team is, because maybe we do want to engage with them, but who is that person that we are going to engage with, and how much influence do they have within their own businesses? So coming back to the mentor sponsoring kind of phase, we also want to identify who those influencers are, whether they have a voice within the organization and how strong that voice is, and how we decide to carry that forward. And then if we've had some like personal relationships and some other factors there. So we do have a go or no-go kind of framework that we go through, and that are some considerations. Another thing that we found has worked really well, because Schneider has a good brand, is case studies. So we look into who our customers are and develop videos and presentations and testimonials out of that. So not only are they a customer of ours, but we help them market their brand to our customer base. And our customers are very strong. We have a lot, like so many people, like millions of people all over the world, and having that global presence is amazing. So we've had a lot of brands kind of come to us, or we go to them and we go, okay, can we do this joint case study together? So then they've got a fancy video that we've paid for, but they secretly have paid for it because they are a customer of ours. And then kind of building that up so that we can also reach out to their networks and their partners, and they can talk about this at their events and we can talk about it at our events, and there's that mutual respect there.
Great. Thanks, Angela. And I think it's always great when you can help your customers be promoted for what they do as well. Obviously, if it makes them a stronger business, they're more likely to be able to afford your services where that's possible as well. So we've got a few minutes left before we jump out into some one-on-one conversations, and I'm just going to throw back to Stuart in a second for another question, but I'm going to just say to Kurt, I just dropped you a quick message, so if you're listening, if you can let me know, that would be great. Thank you. But Stuart, in terms of pipeline, I know there's been sometimes, and we've heard sort of anecdotal stories of different processes that people go through, let's say, for example, with, and I always get it around the wrong way, but accelerating commercialization Australia, whichever way it goes.
That's right and wrong.
Both right and wrong. But that process of going through something, could take a year, or more. The application process to do the R&D, to bring something to life, to then be able to deliver it to a customer. Obviously, they need to be aware that there's a customer at the end of the day before they start that process and dive into, developing a solution. So it could be long, and there obviously has to be faith that that customer at the end of the day will still be there and still wanting what you want when you get to the point of being able to provide it. So for those really sort of, I guess, long-term projects and things that are going to take a long time to test, to pilot, to get off the ground, I guess what advice do you have for people in approaching that, both from a technical perspective, but from a mindset perspective of the duration that it might take to actually see something through to get a paying customer at the end? It could be years.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question. So I haven't actually got the stats with at fingertips, but I think over the last 10 years I've spoken to about 450 companies, a number of whom have actually gone through and succeeded in getting grants, and some of them have actually gone through and succeeded in business. It is a difficult thing to explain to people, the duration it actually takes to be successful in getting your product to market, and depending upon the type of technology, speed to market can be quite critical. One of the things that I think is really important and people don't do well is really understanding the competitor landscape. The number of conversations I've had with companies where the opening line is, the product we have is unique. And I go, yes, okay, well, prove to me that the product you have is unique, because the committee who ultimately assessed the accelerating commercialisation grants were from a very diverse background. And as I would often say to people, they only need to cite one example that you haven't cited, and your grant can crash and burn quite rapidly. And if you go out there and look, there's a lot of products on the market. And so that doesn't mean your business won't succeed, but if you don't have a good idea of the unique value proposition that you are bringing to the table, then you won't succeed. If you don't have an idea of the competitors in the market and what they're doing, in other words, if Schneider is in the market to do something and you're trying to do it as a startup, they've got the resources and they're going to be there a long time ahead of you. Now, that doesn't mean you don't necessarily go down that journey, but again, you have to understand the unique value proposition. What do you know that Angela and her team at Schneider haven't picked up on? It are those sorts of questions that you really got to ask. The other thing is knowing, it's a bit like that old song about the gambler and knowing when to fold and when to hold. Sometimes it's fine to just say, look, it was a good idea at the time, but now it's time to walk away. But I've also seen businesses where people have and I've encouraged them to stay the journey, because it's like, no, actually you have a unique product and it is good. And yes, it's a hard journey and it's not going to happen tomorrow, but that's the reason why everyone else in the world isn't doing it. So I'm not sure that addressed the topic, but that's
I think it did. I think it is definitely important to to make sure, particularly on the competitor landscape, that there's so much happening in the world that we just don't know about yet. And it's not for want of trying sometimes, but you just can't know everything that everyone is doing. So being aware of that is also really important, and that sometimes it will take a long time, and sometimes it's not for you either to stay that course. So just one thing I want to quickly do before we jump out and have some one-on-one conversations with our mentors is just ask Kurt, who's actually going to be a mentor for us in a couple of weeks as well, but is here as a participant as well, to just share a little bit about pipeline development in terms of attracting investment funding and how to keep potential investors aware and warm and on standby, almost, I could say, for when you might need them at some point in the future, because we know that period of time from meeting someone who could be an investor to them investing in you can be a long journey as well, and that is part of a pipeline that you want to focus on too. So Kurt, I just, and I'll put you on the spot with a very quick question of would that be okay? And you said yes, so that's good. So just a little bit around, pipeline development for investors and keeping them engaged.
Sure, thanks Joy. It's critical, it really is. You'll go to so many network events, you'll go to so many different events of some size, shape, and color, and you'll bump into these people. And, I've met some really high net worth investors. I've met some corporate investors. I've met the people that don't invest until Series B and C, but don't lose them. That's all I can say is you've met them, you've maybe exchanged a business card, hopefully, at least give them yours, and they may have given you one of theirs. Put them in a database and communicate with them and continue to communicate with them. It doesn't matter if they never invest with you, they will be your greatest source. It was like Angela was talking about, about your partnerships, and those sponsor partnerships will be able to break open and give you a warm entry into an investor, into your current round, whether it's pre-seed, seed, initial raise, whatever you're doing. So what we did, I like to think way outside the box and do things a little bit different. And video is super impactful. And not to make a 5-minute video, but just a 1 minute, 1.5, 2 minute max video. So my investor database is up to about 300 and some odd at the moment. I should have actually got those statistics before and let you know. But that's the amount of investors that we currently have, potential investors that we have in our database. So every month I do a short video clip of what we're doing, what we're about, and where we're going, and just send it out to them. It's just an informative piece that they can quickly read. They can actually view it and see exactly where you're at. And it keeps them at the forefront of their mind instead of you coming back to them 3 years later and going, oh yeah, you told me you'd invest in me, and when we got to Series C, and they say, well, who are you? So always keep in front of your potential investors. Now, I do the same with my shareholders as well. So every month, I not only do my monthly shareholders report, but I then do a brief 60, 120 second long message to my shareholders telling them about some other issues or some other potential opportunities. And that I get more opens on my videos than I do my documented shareholder reports, which are all technical and all concise. They're not waffling on, but I get more open rates on my videos than I do my actual board reports. And it's an amazing thing to do. So please keep track of your investors and the people that you think have some part to play within your company at a future date.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kurt. Great advice. And yeah, video can work for your potential customer audience as well. They may just prefer to watch a little video than read something really long. All right.